Hello, this is David Anderson, and I'm here with Mr. David Lawler, and we're doing kind of a special about Superman the movie 1978 with Christopher Reeve. He went and saw it in the theater, and I was inspired to buy the new 4K disc. It came with the Blu Ray, and we're here to discuss the movie and perhaps the picture and the sound and the presentation and all that stuff. So how are you today, Mr. Lawler?
I'm all right. It's fucking 1 p.m.
It's
and
early for you.
I'm exhausted. Yeah, we saw Superman. We saw it first showing, actually. It played here for the 40th anniversary, sponsored by Fathom, and the first showing was November 25th at 3 p.m. and we got the first. We were right there, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and all that. And it's interesting because the movie theater was almost half empty at the start of the program, but then it started to fill up like 20, 30 minutes in, and I know why. I think I know why.
Why?
Well, I mean, when you go see a Fathom event, they don't show trailers. So you're usually jerking around for 20, 30 minutes while these stupid trailers about the end of the world and magical beasts are playing, and you're getting your popcorn, you're going to the bathroom. All these people were like coming in and going, shit, it's on. So
yeah, I'm one of those people, but I'm one of those people that comes in like like one time I actually saw a movie as like the end of the last trailer was like but when you do these sort of like event things, I think it was the same for Close Encounters. I was like, I made sure to get there on time.
Actually, I think Close Encounters, I don't think that was a Fathom event, and they did show trailers.
They may have shown. I'm foggy on it, but I remember that it was the Close Encounters was actually, I think, released by Columbia. Like they released it as an actual movie. So that might have actually had trailers, but. Yeah, these Fathom events, you probably have to be. It's an event, so you probably get like a little presentation before you got like the Mole Men or something. Or what would you get?
It was a cartoon of the original cartoon. Well, when it was a Superman cartoon, before, I guess this was either before or during the time of the TV show with George Reeves, and it was a lovely restored color cartoon called The Mechanical Monster. It was a really silly little cartoon, maybe about 10 minutes long, beautifully animated. I mean, it was harkens back to the golden age of animation where you had to do this shit by hand, but it was just really, it was very silly. Apparently it was some evil guy with a mustache has a bunch of programmed robots who steal jewels. They bust into these there's a hall of jewelry or something in Metropolis. I can't believe you would have this. And they steal shitloads of jewelry, and they accidentally steal Lois too. So Clark only cares if it's Lois, so he slips into his Superman outfit, rescues her pretty simply, very little dialogue. It's interesting.
I'm like, this is reminding me of a bit, and Robert Wall, he did this bit about Superman. And it was like, but he was talking about like some sort of like one of like the Mole Men, like one of those little short films. I think it was like one of those Kirk Allen films or something. Yeah. And he was talking about how, this guy, like this bad guy, like shoots him with a bunch of bullets and they just sort of bounce off him.
And then they throw the gun and he's like,
ah! And then he throws the gun at him and he's like, what? And
he's like, you stupid assholes. Don't you know I can deflect bullets? And then they throw their gun and he's like, whoa.
Yeah, and
we're getting a little crazy here. No gun throwing.
Yeah, and it's like he's doing his stand-up presentation, but they're actually like showing like a movie along with it.
Yeah, a little mini movie.
He's dressed as Superman. He's like,
wasn't he the one that also said that like in every Superman episode, Jimmy Olsen winds up tied up in 5 minutes? He's like held hostage in 5 minutes.
Oh, that would have a totally different meaning these days.
Well, I guess. After that, they showed this little 5-minute thing, kind of talking about some of the restoration that they did. And the thing is, I mean, you had mentioned this before about a green suit discrepancy, that his suit looks more green against the blue screen because they had to make it a different color so they could separate him from the photography. I never really noticed that before. They did show examples. Maybe I must have some kind of a green color deficiency or something.
I think, well, it's partially because it's so slight, and if you have because you probably watched it. Did you see it actually in the theater when it came out?
Yes, I did actually as a kid.
Okay, because I did too. I actually have very fuzzy memory of seeing it when it came out in I may have seen it like 79 because it came out like Christmas 78.
Yeah.
And my two memories are him getting in the phone booth, but it's like the half phone booth. That got like a huge laugh. I remember that.
Yeah,
and I remember the train. I remember like him like doing.
Well, he
the
runs
thing
up to the phone booth. It's one of our modern phone booths. It's not like the box that people usually.
They don't even. We
he
don't
just
even
sort
have
of,
modern phone booths. Yeah, it's like
he has to get out of there really quickly because he has to turn into Superman because Lois is hanging from a helicopter over the side of the building, and he takes one look at the small little phone booth, and he's like, nope, not going to.
And again, that's the genius of the Christopher Reeve performance that we will probably. I'm sure we will get into.
Yeah, I've given his performance a lot of thought, and I think I figured out why he works and so many other depictions don't. After that, we launch into the movie, and like I said, there's the original Warner Brothers logo, which I have this feeling that Superman, the original Superman, was such a rushed venture to get into theaters that they just slapped on a logo. They didn't have the typical classic Warner Brothers logo of the time, which was the W heading towards you and then turning black.
Yeah,
instead it just says Warner Brothers right there. I feel like you remember Star Trek: The Motion Picture, how they were in a rush to get that in the theaters right away. I think they edited this thing right up to the last minute to try and get that release before Christmas. And they just slapped on the logo.
Yeah, okay, here's, and I'll explain it. Like, okay, I think the version they showed in the theaters, like this, again, this is a 4K restoration, but it's also tweaked, and I think that the 4K version, and this helps me because I have like the streaming version and the Blu Ray, which are slightly different. Now, when you saw it in the theater, it had the Warner Brothers shield, I believe you're saying?
No. It had ovular stadium font design of that postmodern,
the sort of
the Saul Bass Warner Brothers
the three lines.
But it didn't have it in the traditional way of it moving towards you. Instead, it just had that logo, and it just said from Warner Brothers.
Okay, this is interesting what you saw. Okay, I'm trying to kind of like get it in my head of what I saw, because I saw two different versions. I watched the streaming. I kind of like started the streaming version because I had to like put the code in, and it was a project.
Mm-hmm.
It had the Warner Brothers shield, almost like it was like a Batman movie, like a new Batman movie or something.
Oh, really?
Warner Brothers shield.
That's
it had the Warner Brothers shield. It was silver, and then it went into the movie. And this was the streaming version that I watched because I put in the code. I bought the 4K
That's weird.
disc.
So it's not the same thing I saw.
Yeah, I know. I bought the 4K disc. I put in the digital code, and when I saw on the screen, it says you own UHD, which is 4K. On my setup, I can only watch 1080p, standard HD. So when I watch it, I'm watching the bumped down version of, I'm thinking of the 4K thing. Now, I put in the Blu Ray. Now, the Blu Ray, which is just an HD transfer that was done, I believe, around like 2011-ish, it has the Warner Brothers, the 70s Warner Brothers logo. And again, it's not like the red thing that comes at you.
Yeah.
It's just sort of black, and then it has like the Warner Brothers. So I'm like,
that's the one I saw.
And that's the one I saw on the Blu-ray, but not the streaming. So I'm seeing different versions. I think the only way I can truly know is to be able to get a 4K player and a 4K TV and watch that 4K disc. And it could be a year from now before I could even know what that looks like. But both presentations, both the streaming version and the Blu-ray, had very good sound. The audio levels on the streaming version were somewhat pumped up, so it just, when you have it like louder levels, it just sounds better.
Mm-hmm.
It was in, and interestingly enough, it was in standard Dolby Digital, which is rare for streaming. Usually when you stream something, it's in Dolby Digital Plus because it's a better compression system, and they can they can use less bits to put it on there. So it was like full Dolby Digital. So like that's where I'm like interesting, like, is that the original 70 millimeter mix? I don't know, because the original, this is where these weird different versions of the movies come up.
Yeah.
The Blu-ray has a Dolby Digital 5.1 mix, or actually it's in DTS, but it's a 5.1 mix. It's really good, and it's really clear, and I think it's that sort of somewhat controversial mix that they did in 2001, which is actually better than the original mix, honestly, because the original mix is also on the Blu-ray in old style Dolby stereo, and it's crap.
Mm.
And I know that's what it originally sounded like because I have the Laserdisc. I have the widescreen Laserdisc that I got like in 90, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it also has really shitty sound.
The presentation I saw
Yes.
The sound seemed faithful to how it would have been heard in 1978. They nowadays, you know how things are done nowadays. They crank up the music, they crank up the sound effects, they make it like this mess. The dialogue is very low. When I saw this Superman on Sunday, nothing was too loud. Nothing canceled anything out. The John Williams score was booming, but it wasn't overwhelming. Everything was sort of mixed in a very nice, clean way, even though it was also stereo. Like I said, I think there are new elements in there. Obviously, some of the sound effects were in stereo. Not all the sound effects were in stereo. The dialogue and the music was coming from the screen.
Yeah, sometimes it's like you think it's a new sound, but it's actually the sound was there. It was just so shittily recorded.
Yeah, that's
that you didn't hear it in the first place, and that's a problem.
That's why it might have been more faithful, I think, to 1978. You kind of get taken away with the movie, even though the movie does have a timeless appeal to it. There's only a couple of little things in there that are exclusively 1978. But the way it's shot in this kind of fairy tale way.
Yeah.
With kind of like this fluffy.
It's got a fog and it's got kind of a grain and a fog, and it was specifically shot that way to sort of create the magic. It's Jeffrey Unsworth,
and that's how that works. I mean, I don't think Superman 2 replicates that effect much.
No, because they don't have Jeffrey Unsworth.
No,
I think there are bits and pieces of it.
But according to the schedule, what I read, some of the production schedules, they were shooting this concurrently. They were both trying movies.
And here's the thing. I listened to the commentary. Here's what their process was on this movie. Now, this was produced by the Salkinds, eventually with money from Warner Brothers after they saw that they actually had a good movie, and also because they were running out of money. They were probably most well-known at the time for shooting The Three Musketeers and The Four Musketeers, and I found this out on the commentary. They shot both of those at the same time to save money.
Yeah.
They was like, we were here. We can save money. We got the actors, we got the sets and everything. So both the Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers were shot at the same. So that was like their template of like, hey, we did the Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I guess, this ability to create an instant franchise or something.
Yeah, and he was also like saying like that was their thought of like it was very episodic of like, you know, this is the first episode, and then the next movie is the next episode, and that's how we're gonna do it. And so
I have a couple of theories about the Salkinds.
Well, they have their theories, and you know and Richard, and it turns out Richard Lester, I mean, the director of Superman 2, he was offered but declined. He basically was a producer on this movie. He was the go-between. He came up with ideas, and that's where it's like Richard Lester is like, he was great as a producer and coming up with ideas and helping to craft things, but when you completely put him in charge of what this was, he didn't have a full grasp of what it was, and that's when you get Superman 3 and it's just off the deep end.
Well, it's off the deep end, but you know, I have a special place for my heart for Superman 3. I might even say that I prefer Superman 3 to Superman 2. Whoa. Because at least we have a movie from beginning to end, and with all the magic that they tried to do in replicating, I don't know, maybe the first movie and from point A to point B, there's too many interruptions in Superman 2 and a lot of things that don't make sense. I mean,
well, that's because it's two movies cut together.
That's one of my main problems. Well, first, I just want to talk a little bit about my observations of Superman now after some. Okay, now this was a very important movie to me when I was a kid. I was 6 or 7 years old. As soon as I saw the movie, we had a red bath towel in my house. And a big living room with a big couch, so I put this red towel around my neck and started pretending I was Superman, flying around and jumping on things and doing things and pretending I'm really strong or something like that. It was a very, very important movie for me growing up. There was an incredibly traumatic scene toward the end of the movie where Lois is trapped under all these rocks crushing her in the car, and she dies. In this, it's filmed in such a realistic, horrific manner, almost inconsistent with the rest of the movie that preceded it. It was a traumatic moment for me. I remember being completely scared watching that, and it's weird. I'm sitting with my daughter. My daughter is the first person in the house to cringe whenever something comes up. She was watching this. She was glued to it. She really did like the movie a lot. it's interesting. She makes an observation to me. She said the credits were really long, and I'm like, yeah, the opening credits are long, but they're cool. But they do go on for about 3 minutes. I think those opening credits. That's what
makes it. It's like that's part of the awesomeness of the movie.
These kids are not. They don't understand this. That you have to have a slow build up. You have to have a progression. You have to have tension. You have to have conflict, and then you have your climax and your resolution. That's how a movie should be played, but movies aren't being made like this anymore. It's weird. Richard Donner is probably quietly one of the most influential directors because he sort of pioneered this style in a way. And the movies that he made from, well, I guess The Omen was one of his first, right? As a major motion picture,
and
right?
that's how he got the call, because the original director was Guy Hamilton. Director of James Bond movies, Goldfinger, the quite less good Diamonds Are Forever.
Actually, there are a couple of Bond crew members on Superman.
Oh, there's a lot. Derek Meddings, I think, is in there.
Yeah, John Glenn. I saw John Glenn was an assistant director.
But because of Brando, they were going to shoot it in Spain, and because of Brando, the Last Tango in Paris, it was like declared like obscene in Spain or something. They couldn't do it without Brando.
Speaking of which, like, Bernardo Bertolucci just died.
Yes,
another one.
Interesting.
And I made this observation that all of these people seem to die toward the end of the year. Have you noticed that?
Well, it's the holidays. It's sad,
Postpartum depression. No,
could be. But but because of that, so like, okay, we're gonna shoot it in England because there's nothing going on, and we'll shoot it at Elstree Studios. There's nothing going on. We'll get a deal, and then Guy Hamilton's like, well, because I'm British and I'm rich, I can't work there because they're gonna tax the fuck out of me.
Yeah.
So I can't do it. And then that's how Richard Donner got the call. They're like, oh, we seen the movie, The Omen. He's a good kid. He
knows how to make a movie. He knows how to
because The Omen, how to make a movie.
The Omen is a ridiculous, schlocky movie, but it's so well made, so entertaining. Yeah. It's never boring. This is a guy, I mean, like, Donner was doing television for years. I mean, and that's one of my problems with the Salkins. I don't think they understand how Americans make movies. They hail from Germany by way of France, or the French, German, Russian mix of filmmakers. They don't really quite do it. I think they latched on to the idea of Superman because he's iconic, and they thought they either had one of two thoughts. One thought being, we'll grab onto this piece of Americana, we'll make a shitload of money doing it, or they were thinking we'll invest in a flop and we'll run away with the cash.
I'm listening to the commentary
because they complained about Richard Donner spending money, and the thing is, it's a 300-page script, and they complained about the epic quality that Donner was bringing to the movie. I'm like, it's a 300-page script.
The idea was, we're going to do something big. We're going to buy something big, and then and he asked us.
Their idea of a major star is Marlon Brando in 1978.
Yeah, and it was like it was because, and this is how they get, like, he knew, is like Salkind. He says he knew somebody that said, hey, I can talk to Brando if you want, because like they're like, we need a star.
They need Brando. Brando to them represents big American star.
You want to talk about A-list? He was like above A-list.
Well, he was above, but he was like he had a really rough reputation at that time. This was after The Godfather. It was after Last Tango. Yeah, he hadn't really made any movies between that time and Superman.
And he does say that Brando needed cue cards, and that was what we did.
Yeah.
And it's not even.
But they were also, according to the featurette that I looked at, they were considering Burt Reynolds and John Voight for the role of Superman. I'm like, what?
Mr. Salkind says he was insistent that they get now that they've got stars, and they were actually going after Dustin Hoffman for Lex Luthor. For Lex Luthor.
Oh.
And he almost did it. He was like, they just
Dustin Hoffman is one of those actors who almost does everything until he changes his mind at the last minute. Like Blade Runner. Remember, he was like on board Blade Runner for a year until he said, I talked to my wife and she says I don't make a good hero.
Well, you know what? He's made perhaps some personal decisions in his life, maybe not good, but as far as like roles he's picked, he's usually, when he finally makes the decision, he's usually pretty good.
Yes. Except for maybe, I don't know, Captain Hook.
This movie is a miracle of filmmaking because of the way it was made. You're talking about they don't make movies like this anymore.
They really don't. No.
They shouldn't make movies this way because
maybe in the pre-production sense.
Oh my goodness.
Because they had one script. They had the story by Mario Puzo puts it together.
Mario Puzo, who's by the way Mario Puzo, it was his idea of we need conflict. We need to really mix it up. We need to kill somebody. We need to kill a major character. So. But then they just kind of kept that in the back of their head. So when they were getting to the ending and they realized we don't have an ending, and they had to tack on the Superman 2 ending of moving the Earth back, which was actually Richard Lester, because this is all according to.
Wait a minute. Wait a second. Correct me if I'm wrong. But when he diverts that first nuclear missile, that nuclear missile is supposed to be the nuclear missile that blows up the prison that Zod and the others are in.
We watched that quasi Donner cut using what he had, and that was going to be the original idea of sending it out.
Now that
I think
works.
that the way that the ending is on this is perfect, because if they had done their original idea of ending it on that cliffhanger, people would have been so fucking pissed that people at the time. Now today you can do that in a sort of like a Marvel Avengers thing. We expect it. We know it's coming. We know some sort of cliffhanger with a little tack on during the credits. We love it. But at the time in the 70s, if you'd done some sort of thing, he shoots it off in the coming soon, Superman 2, people would be like,
oh yeah.
Fuck you.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
I have to admit, I shed tears about 3 times during the movie.
There are a couple of choke up moments in this movie. I gotta say.
The beginning, there's this beginning where the curtains open. And
they got you at the beginning.
Somebody's opening a comic book, and this I think is what works. And they didn't really make comic book movies back then, but comic books were relegated to TV, right? Marvel mainly, like the Incredible Hulk and things like that. You make a big scale comic book movie, but it's a movie on its own.
I'm trying to do the chronology of this now. Would not have Incredible Hulk and the Spider-Man series around that time, would that not have been after Superman, or maybe as they knew Superman was being made, because they knew that was might
have been during that time. They could have started TV shows and wrapped entire seasons during the time it took to shoot Superman.
Oh yeah, that took them 2 years.
Because imagine this: you're making a movie, you got to get it out there for release, and you keep making the movie because it was all originally one big thing that they cut into 2 pieces. So they're already working on Superman 2 as Superman is being released. Yeah, and this was around the time that Donner was fired. He was fired in 1979, right?
Yeah, basically what happened was they shot all the Gene Hackman bits in Superman 2 are what they shot during that first shoot. And then they couldn't use Brando because they only had him for one movie and they couldn't renegotiate his.
I read that Brando refused to come back when they fired Donner. He asked,
something like that.
Because Donner's firing caused a war in the production between cast members. Hackman and Margot Kidder and Marlon Brando were all on Donner's side. The only people that really didn't care, I guess, were the three prisoners from Krypton who came back. And for some reason, I don't know, maybe it's a fuck you to Richard Donner, but they were they let Lester reshoot Donner's scenes so he could get a credit as director, which I think is kind of fucked up and unprofessional.
I think it has to do with it has to be a certain percentage of shot to be able to say it's a director, but you can't really say
it's such a waste of money too. I mean, it's incredibly.
Mr. Salkind says on the commentary, words basically, first the movie comes out, everybody loves each other. They're like, okay, this is great. We're gonna do another one. We'll come back for 2, and then they start to be words are exchanged and things are said about each other, to each other, about things that happened on the set, things that cannot be taken back, and arguments were had. And,
Donner, like I said, Donner, I was telling you the other day, Donner is just he's irascible. He's not politically correct. He made a lot of comments about Pierre Spengler. He said Pierre Spengler can't produce. He's a shitty producer. He's just a friend of the Salkinds. They grew up together and all that stuff, and he doesn't know his ass from his elbows or something. I don't know.
Well, okay. Let me explain.
And Europeans are not used to that kind of personality.
Yeah, let me tell you something. And this happens. It probably happens in any workplace where you work with a bunch of people. Everybody has what they do. Sometimes you just don't get along with someone, and you have a bug up your ass about them, or they have a bug up their ass about you. It's just your personalities are not compatible. You're both good at what you do, perhaps, but you just do not work well together. And then when you involve hundreds of millions of dollars and money and like, you know, and also, you know, by this time, from what I heard, like Richard Donner was like, he was like, he's getting trouble from these people, and then he would get an offer to do something else, and he's like, you know, I don't need this anymore. I'll go do something else.
In Europe, the director is not the superstar. The producers tend to be the superstar. The crew can bully the director around. This is why they had problems always with, like I mentioned before, James Cameron when he was working on Aliens in England. Ridley Scott comes over to America to make Blade Runner, gets into an immediate conflict with the Hollywood crew. It was more of a workman-like job being a film director. Just do it. We're doing it. But then this was the end of the 70s and the beginning of the blockbuster, so the director was becoming a superstar.
Also, remember, feathers were probably ruffled because you know, we're talking about like friends and everything of like, okay, the Salkinds are friends with Mario Puzo and David Newman and Leslie Newman. The like, there's so many writers on this thing. Like,
well, no, the first set of writers whose names I can't remember.
Robert Benton
and those were the second ones. They came in and they were American. Robert Benton and Leslie Newman are these screenwriters. They started off as screenwriters. They wrote Bonnie and Clyde.
And then eventually, when Donner comes in, he's like, okay, there's some good stuff in here, but pretty much, I need to start over, and I need to bring in my friend Tom Mankiewicz.
Yeah,
because when you listen to the commentary on his version, like it's like a slightly extended version, and we should probably get into that too, of like different versions of the movie. But he basically says, you know, the script there was a lot of issues, so I just had my friend come in. He completely scrapped it and started over. He had this whole concept of it's basically 3 movies. It's Krypton, it's Smallville, and then it's the big city and Superman. He had like 3 movies. He had an idea of like he needs like a beginning in the middle, and then you have the end. It all kind of comes together, but like there's all these sort of disparate story ideas that would be like, okay, we need a little bit of this, and then the ending is like, well, we have to cut it. Okay, what do we do? So it's like, again, this movie is a miracle because you could easily have ended up with Superman 4. You could have easily ended up with, oh, okay, we can't do that. We can't do this. Okay, well, the actors get like a week off. And I just listened to like an interview with John Cryer, who played, he played Lenny.
Yeah.
And he was basically saying, oh, I get to go to England. Oh, they just took a whole bunch of the script out. I get a week off. Oh, okay. And he said he saw the original script that was pretty much written by Christopher Reeve, who really was always invested in the part, in producing and whatever. The script that they had originally was really good, but then they kept saying, okay, no, we've got to take this out. Okay, oh, no budget. Okay, we now have half the budget. Okay, we got to take this out. Oh, we're gonna do 5 weeks of wire work. We only get 1 week. Okay.
Yeah.
That's why you see that one shot of Christopher Reeve flying in every shot, is because of they didn't have all the, I mean, they spent so much money on this movie. And that's another thing. This movie was the most expensive movie ever made at the time. I think it had like a $50 million budget, and that's in 1977, which is still, when you think about it, I mean, that's probably, if you multiply that in today's dollars, it's maybe 4 times today's dollars.
Yeah.
Could you make a big action movie for $200 million today? No. You'd need 253, you know, for the big movies now, like the Batman versus Superman. That thing cost like $300 million easy.
Right.
That's why they lost money on it, even though it actually made money. But it's like there's so many things could have gone wrong.
It was diminishing returns, though. I think the first movie made the most, 300 million. The second movie made about 200 million. And then the third movie made, I don't know, 80 million. It was a real precipitous drop there.
But I think by the time they got to 3, because like 1 and 2, they just, so many things went wrong that they spent so much money. By the time they got to 3, that probably had like maybe like a $35 million budget. So it probably still made money. You couldn't make a big action Superman movie.
Well, not me. I don't know. It depends on what you've got shot. I mean, like I watch these movies. For instance, say Jurassic World cost the new Jurassic World movie cost about $150 million, and it's a bunch of dinosaurs running around. That.
Well, they do a lot of that in a computer. I mean, this so much.
But then I look at the Meg, And The Meg had $150 million budget, and it looks like it was shot like on a weekend on somebody's boat. I mean, it really...
come on, they got to pay Jason Statham. They got to pay Jason Statham's head buffer.
They don't need Jason Statham. What they need is a good story. I mean, it was kind of a fun, stupid movie, but for $150 million, you're kind of expecting a hell of a lot more than that.
I think worldwide, I think that made a lot of money. Like, because
it did, of course, because it has those pivotal scenes that take place in China.
Yeah,
but
yeah, they do that in a lot of movies now, where they'll have something happen in China with like a well-known Chinese actor, so that it does well in China.
It had never occurred to me that Christopher Reeve doesn't really show up in the movie until maybe almost an hour in.
No, Superman doesn't show up until like halfway through the movie, and it's like a 2 hour. So he's about an hour and 15 is when actually like Superman shows up or something. When he actually like gets in this. Now you see a glimpse of him when he's when he's 18 and he looks nothing like him, and he's Jeff East with a weird nose,
right?
And with Christopher Reeve's voice, which is always weird.
Yeah, he's first they say, well, there's one revelation: when the practically newborn baby at the beginning of the movie is actually a girl. It's not a boy.
Really? I didn't know that.
And then as he grows and he's got the hair and everything, then they get a boy, and he lifts the truck for Ma and Pa Kent.
Well, he's certainly a boy there.
He's a boy.
A little winky there.
Yeah, and then he's the teenager later on, and then he finally becomes the Christopher Reeve super, which means he's been hanging out in his Fortress of Solitude, I want to say, for a few years then. Obviously.
For 12 years, because he's Superman is like perpetually 30. So he's been in there, and it's like you are in your 18th year, my son. You are now in your 18th year of I will have been dead for many thousands of your years, or something like that.
But okay. Now the way Donner tells the story, he doesn't even need dialogue half the time. It surprised me how very little dialogue is actually in the movie until we get to Metropolis. There's montage. It seems to be kind of and I don't mean montage in the sense of Breakfast Club, Scarface, Rocky IV. I mean like a montage in terms of telling a story simply through images. He goes to his barn. He sees a glowing thing under the floorboards. He picks up the green crystal. Because of the music and the way John Williams tells a story with music, you kind of know what's going on without anybody telling you. And then he tells his mom he's got to leave.
Yeah, and this is efficient storytelling. I mean, when you think about it, it's a big movie and it's got a lot of story to tell, and you need to sort of condense the narrative, but yet get the emotional experience. I mean, like the whole Smallville and this is the Jeffrey Unsworth photography. It's very Norman Rockwell-esque.
Yes,
it's got that look to it, and of course, special product placement promotion of Cheerios. I always notice that, like when Ma Kent is like looking out the window, there's this big box of Cheerios like on the side. I don't think you see it on like the old home video version because it's probably lopped off.
Yeah,
but I want to quickly.
Yeah, well, in the pan and scan, when there are certain things you remember because you watch it. You watch this movie mainly in the '80s. You watched it on a small TV. So the pan and scan would go back and forth, but it was actually all in the same frame. Yeah,
although I will say for a widescreen movie, it does translate pretty well to a pan and scan presentation a lot of the time. At least I remember it. I remember it feeling cramped, or it wasn't like something like some movies where it's like they really use that widescreen like to put people way across the screen and have them do things. But okay, I want to talk about like different versions of this movie. So you have the theatrical cut that everybody saw in 1978 and 79, which I think is actually the preferred cut because it flows the most. I mean, there are different longer versions, and I'll get into that. So you got this nice version. I believe it's 2 hours and I'm actually got my Blu Ray on me. It is 2 hours and 143 minutes. So that's 2 hours and 23 minutes. And I think it's actually 2 hours and 22 minutes because I remember the countdown on the thing. So you've got that version. It's a lean, tight. It's about the length of say like a Phantom Menace or a Casino Royale. It's got a good pace. Then you have the somewhat sped up and cut down end credits of the first home video edition that I sent you. I sent you a picture of that. Yeah. Where it's like it's 127 minutes somehow, and I think it's a combination of time compressed to get it on like one tape because they couldn't use thin tapes then, I guess. They didn't quite have the technology down in like 1970. And by the way, that's a quick turnaround for a home video release. If it came out in 1979, that means within a year of it being in the theaters, and it was a massive hit at the time, it's on VHS and costs, I guess, like $80, $100 or something. It's VHS and beta.
Would that have been a Salkind or Warner decision to do that? They wanted to get it. Maybe they wanted to get it out to capitalize on the sequel coming out. Because if people go and see the sequel, they go, "Oh, I want to grab this on video."
In America, the sequel wouldn't come out until like summer of '81. I remember it's actually made in 1980, but it didn't come out. I think it like slowly rolled out in Europe like months before it came out here. I would actually only see it in the theater once when I saw it, and then I saw Superman 2, and then I don't think I actually rented that tape, but I did actually catch it on cable. I would say in late 1981, like actually around I remember watching it like right before my birthday, so that would have been like maybe December 8th of 1981, and I watched it, and then I'd say about like a few months later, it's on ABC television, the big 2-night presentation, like I think in February '82.
Yes,
and that was when I really got into it. I'm like, oh, that was like kind of when I like was really excited about the movie. I mean, I liked it. And I liked Superman 2, and so I was getting all hyped up because now I'm like I'm a young boy. I'm strapping. It's exciting and everything. But I watched that 2-night event, and man, that cut is so long. It's basically got everything they ever shot in that movie, and it's like a 3-hour and 2-minute movie. And now people want it, even though it's a flabby, Richard Donner has disowned it cut, where it's like all these extra bits. You have this weird thing where like a Kryptonian police officer is heading towards, you know what shot I'm talking about?
No.
Okay, there's a shot. It's kind of as Jor-El is sending his son in space. There's like, you see this sort of Kryptonian. It's the guy, you see him in Superman 2 as well, like the guy that gets his neck broken at the beginning. He pushes the button and goes, alert, alert, alert. Yeah. Okay, so he's one of those guys. And you just see him like traveling on this thing, and then you just see like this his point of view, like of him moving along a thing, like, and you just see his eyes and everything. But then like the planet's exploding, and then it turns all red. It's all this sort of, it's kind of cool, but it's like kind of extraneous, and it's all these extra shots of different things. There's like weird stuff where Superman like rescues Miss Teschmacher from like some sort of like sea creature or something that Lex Luthor has. Oh, really? But it doesn't even fit in with the plot of where he is in the movie. And it's like stuff like that.
Well, I can see why Donner wouldn't prefer that, because those are kind of more, I don't know, schlocky moments that don't really fit into what he's doing. What he's trying to do is make an epic here, Yeah,
he said like, I don't even know why I shot most of this stuff. It doesn't fit. It's not right, but you're there, you're shooting stuff. But now you can get it on Blu Ray as like the extended super long cut, and people are like, oh, this is awesome. It's like, no, it's not.
I don't know. It's good for historical curiosity.
It's good for historical reasons, but like it mostly work better as like deleted scenes.
A lot of that stuff that you just mentioned sounds a lot like something you would see in the cartoon,
Yeah.
Just silly. It doesn't need to be there. This is actually, I think maybe the Salkinds were more invested in a comic book comedy, kind of a science fiction adventure in a comic book form. Comic books tend to get away with those kind of storytelling
well, not according to Mr. Salkind. He says that this is his point of view, because he's like, and he sometimes will say like, maybe I'm remembering this wrong.
He's not exactly partial, and also he's trying to cover his own ass, so
he could be. And well, see, but the great thing is like this commentary makes me really want to get Superman 2 just so I can get his commentary, because he basically teases like, and I'm going to really get into the story of like what happened when I talk about Superman 2. So I'm like, I might just need to buy that it's probably really cheap on Blu-ray if it's not any sort of like extended special edition or anything. Because the Donner cut has, Richard Donner and Tom Mankiewicz, and they just completely they completely throw everyone under the bus, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
So you have that cut, and like, okay, people watch it on TV. It's great. I think it goes like into syndication, and everybody loves it. I think it might be even a shorter version. I don't know what version the syndication got. And then you get like, but most of the home video editions, which I actually have. I have would get it later, but I have the released in 1983, I think, to coincide with when Superman 3 came out. I have the 1983 Laserdisc that is pan and scan. I have the 1990 widescreen Laserdisc, which we're talking about Warner Brothers logos.
Yeah.
It starts with sort of the newer Shield Warner Brothers logo with like the clouds and everything.
Yeah.
And then it goes into the movie, and the sound is so shitty. It's like, man, this sounds shitty. It'll have like a stereo effect and sometimes a surround sound effect, but it sounds like at best like mid-fi.
Yeah.
And I guess most of the time people didn't notice, because like they'd be watching on a videotape and they'd be watching on the TV speaker. You can't really tell. But when you crank it up on a home theater, it's like, whoa, this is crap. Regular theatrical cut, as far as everybody knows, Then there's like in 2001, there is a complete sort of re-release on DVD that I got, which I loved, which is basically it's got a little couple of those things from the TV cut, but it's more like there's just a couple scenes that I don't know if the movie has better flow as the theatrical, but there's two scenes. There's one right after Superman does his first, like, he does all of his stuff where he saves right after he saves Lois, he does a whole bunch of other Superman-y stuff.
Yeah.
And then right after that, he goes back to the Fortress of Solitude and actually talks to Jor-El.
Yeah.
And I think that's in the TV version.
Where I have the most valuable Warner Brothers clamshell in my entire collection because I collect them.
Yeah.
The Warner Brothers clamshell of Superman. It's, to my knowledge, the first complete version of the movie on videotape. When they, I guess, figured out, hey, wait a minute, if we make the tape a little bit thinner, then we can probably
put it on a thinner. Because by then it's probably released like an 80, 81 when you could make basically take a 160 and make it a 140 by just making it slightly less tape. It's probably By the way, those are completely okay tapes. So
I gave it a viewing upon purchase to confirm that it was indeed Superman, and it's actually it's a very good tape. It's a very good high quality tape.
Now, is it? I'm trying to think now. Depending on when it was released, is it in any? Does it say any sort of stereo? It probably would have been around that time. Might not have been in hi-fi stereo, but would have been like in sort of that old linear stereo.
Yeah.
Does it say like Dolby Stereo on there or anything?
No, it doesn't say Dolby Stereo, but it is a stereo tape.
Oh.
But it doesn't say Dolby Stereo on the box. I don't know if they put their logo on videotapes back then at that time. They might have. I'm not sure.
It's probably a linear. It's probably like. So,
but it is a stereo. It is a stereo presentation.
Oh, okay.
And
no, okay. Now, when you okay, I want to sort of dig deeper here. So, you watched it on your hi-fi stereo machine.
Yeah, I had.
That's what you're saying, and it was in hi-fi stereo.
Yeah, it was definitely hi-fi, but there were elements on the left and right channels that were independent. Okay,
well then that means what it probably is if it's got hi-fi stereo, that would have been a clamshell. Would have been like one of the last. When we talked about this,
but it didn't have. It was interesting. It didn't have like a poster of Superman. It just had a picture of Christopher Reeve flying. I think that was it.
We talked about this with John Fralick one time about how sometimes it'll be like a new tape in an old package.
Might be. Yeah.
So you'll have like it literally could have been released in like 80. Well, hi-fi didn't start coming out until like 84, 85 on VHS.
I really should have dug it out.
So it might have literally been like a newer tape in the sort of the last of the clamshell versions of it. If it's in hi-fi stereo.
It isn't. It's in very good condition, just superficially looking at it. The tape itself, the label is a little bit worn. Labels get worn. You pop them in the machine constantly and all that. But there's no tracking errors or anything, and there was no I don't know what we would call artifacting. I guess there's no artifact or anything like that. There's no lapses in the audio.
Now,
nice mix too. It was a good mix, perfect. It seemed like a good mix for stereo and a good mix for just like a television with one speaker.
Yeah,
it all comes together fairly cleanly.
That would have probably been that mid-fi mix where it's like, yeah, it's stereo and it sounds good, but it's not like the newer. Certainly not like a newer mix, which goes right into my point. Goes right into my point of so that new sort of recut is in. They completely went back to all the original sound elements. This is what you would get on DVD in 2001, or maybe even in 2000. No, it's 2001. You would get like a full 5.1 Dolby Digital remix. They went back to all the original elements, redid it, cleaned it up, added some new sound effects, and that's sort of where the controversy is of like, hey, this isn't my old Superman. Well, yeah, but the old Superman had kind of a shitty mix anyway.
Yeah.
And this is all Richard Donner approved, by the way. This isn't like George Lucas going in, I'm going to put this in here. I'm going to put and Greedo shoot first. The mix is really good. It sounds like a newer movie because they took all of the original sound elements, but then they completely remixed them, cleaned them up, enhanced a few things. Richard Donner's like, I want the S to swoosh from back to front, stuff like that.
Yeah.
To give you the real feeling. It's got the deep bass and everything. And people were kind of pissed of like, this isn't my Superman mix. There's weird sounds, So
I have a question for you. This may be a Mandela effect kind of question, but I could have sworn that when young Superman, 18-year-old Superman or whatever, is racing the train
Yeah.
Remember when he's racing the train and he eventually hops over the tracks or whatever? There's a little girl in there.
It's Lois Lane.
She's watching. She's watching this.
Yeah, she's watching. She is Lois Lane in that super extended TV cut.
Now, okay.
Her parents. One of her mom is played by
Phyllis Thaxter, I believe.
Phyllis, who actually.
I remember there being dialogue that confirmed.
She said, "Oh, Lois."
Confirmed
Lois.
that was Lois Lane watching him from the train. I didn't hear that dialogue in the version in the theater.
No, it's because it's not in there. It's in the TV version. It's in that super extended TV version.
Okay, so I do remember some element of the TV broadcast.
Yeah, it's in there. And maybe our friend...
And they did it. They replicated it again for Smallville, for the TV show Smallville. They had the same scene with Tom Welling doing his running, and they actually have the dialogue about her confirming that she's Lois Lane. Why
do I feel like our friend Chris Cooling has that super long extended TV cut to be completist about this kind of thing?
He just might.
He might. It seems like the sort of thing he'd be into. And
so it was like it was confirming that it was Lois Lane, but it wasn't there. So I felt like I was missing something, or maybe I was looking at a new cut.
Well, you probably were remembering that big 2-night event. You probably watched it too. I mean, I guess.
Probably. We didn't have a VCR yet at the time that it had premiered. So when it premiered on TV, it was like a big event. When movies played on television back then, it was a big deal.
Yeah, and just imagine,
Superman, King Kong, and what else? What's another big movie that played? The Towering Inferno. When these movies were on television, we only had the 3 networks. It was a big deal,
and maybe an independent.
The Exorcist, when it came out on television, was a big deal.
I'm trying to imagine the amount of tens of millions of viewers that you would not get today because everything is fractured.
Yeah.
Of like, it probably got like a 30, 40, 50 million viewers.
Maybe.
And just think of all the ad revenue they got.
Now you're happy. You're happy if you can get 6 million viewers. It's really bad. There's so many options now. I mean, we have DVR and all that stuff.
They get money from us in so many other ways. It probably even
also, have you noticed? I mean, on television, they're not cutting movies as much anymore. Now they're letting movies run almost uncut. They're just expanding. They're expanding their time. So a movie like what's a movie that CBS plays constantly? Iron Man. They started showing Iron Man 3. It's like 4 hours or something on TBS because they're showing almost a complete version of this movie. But back then, if you had a 2-hour movie, you had to chop, and if it was, you had to chop out a half an hour to make room for commercials.
What they would do is there used to be laws about how many commercials you could put in something. So what they would do is if it's starting out as a 2-hour and 23-minute film, you could probably squeeze that into 3. You could probably you could do like they do with that tape of you could trim about 5 minutes out of it and run it in 3 out. Run it go from 8 to 11.
You could if it was worth it, but most movies weren't that long back then.
But then they realized it's almost like
that's another pioneering thing. Superman's a very long movie, and most of the money there is on screen, except save Marlon Brando, of course.
Yeah, well, he cost he was worth every penny because he boosted it. I mean, if they pay him $3 million,
he's great. Sure actually, Brando, when you think of Brando, like in '78, Brando was already kind of like a caricature. He was like a stereotype. He was like, why do you come to me on the day of my father's wedding? He's like, but here he's eloquent. He's refined. He has an almost British accent the way he speaks. He's like,
he gives it he gets it the funding basically. You get Marlon Brando, you get Gene Hackman. You got a movie. In fact, that's the way they promoted it.
They promoted it as a Brando Hackman movie starring Christopher Reeve. Christopher Reeve was not a name yet, and he made a name for himself. This movie killed his career. Everything he tried to do that wasn't Superman failed miserably.
Everything worked out for him and I'm pretty sure the check cleared when he did Superman 4. I think he made $4 million for that.
Yeah, and he got the name. Well, he got the name. Did he get the name above the title for Superman 2 though? Because Hackman was in that as well.
No, he didn't. It was Gene Hackman and then Christopher Reeve.
And then did he at least get top billing for Star Trek? Did he at least get top billing for Superman 3?
Oh yeah, who else is going to be? Margot Kidder's going to get.
Well, Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor was the biggest.
Oh, Richard Pryor.
He was the biggest comedian on the planet at the time.
The best hacker in the world.
It was all downhill from there. But for me, Superman is almost a perfect movie, except for the structure of it. Because Donner wanted an epic, he wanted to tell a story that began with Superman's birth to I don't know where his original conception of Superman should have ended to make a complete movie.
I think his original concept of Superman was he starts off on Krypton, and by the end of the movie, he is fully the Superman. It's an origin story. He is fully the Superman that we've come to know and love, and that we a lot of people haven't read the comic books, and they just assume, okay, they have an idea of what Superman is, of what they think Superman is, based on what they've seen. And somehow this movie encapsulates what your vague idea of Superman is. But again, it all comes down to the Christopher Reeve performance. Somehow this miracle of who they found, of the performance, because there are times in the movie, because he was bulking up as they were making the movie. So if you look at the movie, there are parts of it when he's looking a lot thinner, and he has to basically just sort of stand a certain way and sort of have the presence, and somehow he pulls it off. He
is absolutely the most perfect Superman. George Reeves is not. George Reeves is like some middle-aged guy with kind of a lumpy physique. He's not particularly muscular in the sense, he was probably considered muscular for his time in 40s and 50s, right?
Yeah.
But he's really kind of lumpy. He's got kind of a pot belly that he has to suck in a little bit when he's wearing a uniform. Now, as far as other depictions, okay. Now, Tom Welling, for me, is probably second best as far as Superman goes.
He was Superboy, and he didn't even.
But he embodies that characteristic, that elusive quality that Christopher Reeve had. Christopher Reeve, I was talking to my wife after the movie, and I was like, you know what I think he does right is that he has this combination of wholesomeness, innocence, almost a naivete, but he's also exudes confidence and strength. And he realizes that he has to be... There's a great piece of dialogue in Kill Bill Part 2 where David Carradine is talking about how most superheroes, their disguise is their costume. But with Superman, his disguise is Clark Kent. He's supposed to pretend to be this kind of awkward, perhaps nervous, mild-mannered reporter.
Yeah, and it's like that's, the genius of his performance is he's Superman pretending to be Clark Kent, and you can tell that he's going on multiple layers of he knows he's Superman, and he knows he's basically an actor playing someone that's acting. Like it's like he's double acting because he's Superman. Yes. He knows he's Superman, and in fact you see it early on in the movie when he's hanging out with Lois. First they bump into Rex Reed, which is talk about the 70s.
Rex Reed, yeah. I remember a behind the scenes video where they just shot Rex Reed's scene, and Donner comes up to him and says, "Are you going to give us a good review because of this?" And he's like, "Oh, we'll see."
Yeah, but so the
Rex Reed, whose only other acting credit, by the way, I think was a movie called Myra Breckenridge. Where he was actually an actor in the movie. He was acting. He wasn't just some guy who glad-handing somebody else. He is the male version of what would eventually become Raquel Welch. Myra Breckenridge is a very interesting movie for people to watch now, especially in this current climate of transgenderism. It's about a man who becomes a woman who is like a female superhero who kills men. Like I said, Tom Welling is the closest comparison to Christopher Reeve that's substantial for me. Dean Cain is interesting, but he doesn't quite work for me. And Lois and Clark is a show I never really got into.
Let me tell you something. Dean Cain always gets his props because he's the one who de-virginized oh God, what's her name? Brooke Shields.
Oh really? What are you talking about? Reality?
I'm talking in reality. She was 22 at the time or something. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. Well. Props to Dean. But after that, okay, Superman Returns, directed by Bryan Singer, is such a... I dislike the movie on so many levels, and I dislike Brandon Routh, I believe is his name, who played that Superman. He was a stalker. He was creepy. He was weird. He had this...
By the way, if you've seen him in other stuff, he's really good in other stuff. Actually, it's really weird. Somehow it doesn't translate in the film, but when you see him interviewed, when you see him in other things, he does have that sort of Christopher Reeve feel to him of this very affable, likable, handsome, charming guy.
But he's so not in the movie.
But not in this movie. Like somehow, like they saw, and he looks, in certain angles, he does look Reeve-esque, and he has kind of the voice too, and so you can see why they kind of went in that direction. But that, we could talk about Bryan Singer and all of his issues.
But then we move on to Henry Cavill.
Yes.
Henry Cavill is better than Brandon Routh, but nowhere near as as acceptable or believable to me. I don't buy it. I don't buy it any more than I buy Ben Affleck as Batman.
I don't think it's his fault.
And you want to compare it, like, let's compare visual quality between, say, something like Batman versus Superman to those Superman movies. Even the, I don't know, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace or whatever. It doesn't appeal to me. I've seen the movie now several times, and it just doesn't do anything for me. It's like a video game. It's so badly shot for me. I hate the way that movie is shot.
You're just not a fan of Zack Snyder or anything like that.
No, it's not that. Like I said, okay. I enjoyed the remake of Dawn of the Dead. I thought it was fantastic. And then there's Kevin Spacey, who is really creepy. Anyway, I mean, never mind everything that's happened.
So that movie is double creepy. You've got Stalker.
You're kind of
Superman,
disappointed. It's
you got Bryan Singer, and you've got
Smallville was a show that I watched religiously for years. Yeah. I loved it. I thought it was
Christopher
fantastic.
Reeve was on an episode. Did you see that one?
Yes, I did. I was very sad.
I remember that, and they even played some of the music that music. I remember that.
I had a lump in my throat watching that. It was very sad.
And I feel so bad for what happened to him, because like just when you, and maybe I had put it out of my mind when I watched it, the tragedy of what happened to him after the movie, way after the movie, like I believe it happened in '95 when he was riding a horse and broke his neck, and I think, and he was interviewed later where he like debated, should I just have the plug pulled? I think he should have had the plug pulled.
Well, I don't know. He when he popped up on the Oscars after his accident, my mother was really impressed with the fact that he could operate a wheelchair and speak.
Yeah, but is that a life to be? And he was 10 years. You know what? I think what killed him was like literally like some sort of infection or a bed sore or something. Yeah. Like that's what kills you when you're like that.
He had suffered from various ailments in connection with all of the assisted living he had to go through.
And his wife. See, this is the problem. This is why I think he should have pulled the plug on himself. All he did was make people feel better about himself while he suffered for 10 years. Look, life. I'm a fully healthy adult man. And life is still a fucking pain in the ass sometimes. And when you're fucked up in a wheelchair and you can't do shit, you can't do anything, everybody has to clean you and everything. Is that a life? Did he do much with it?
He did. He directed a movie for HBO, In the Gloaming, and it was quite a well-made movie. He did quite a few things, and he did a lot for charity, and he did a lot for stem cell research. Remember, South Park made fun of him.
I know, but it's like when I think about it, it's kind of the same way I feel about like the ice bucket challenge. Where it's like Stephen Hawking, up to his death, was still in that fucking chair. Dumping ice on your head did not fix anything.
No,
people.
It didn't. But
people are still fucked up.
But people like to feel good about themselves. You know, it kind of.
Oh well, fuck that. Okay. Fuck you. Fuck you.
The real sad part of it is that Dana, his wife, died a couple of years after him.
And that's what I was going to say. Of
lung cancer, and she wasn't even a smoker.
Exactly, and it's like I'm thinking part of it was she was a great wife. And she took care of him.
I think she loved him, and I think when you see like somebody die in your family, and then you see their spouse die immediately after, it means they couldn't live without them.
Oh, I think that it's because she was so busy taking care of him, she couldn't take care of herself. It was all about him, so she couldn't. If she was having an issue, she didn't go to the doctor. She didn't notice what was going on with her.
That's love. And if they tell her, you have lung cancer, you're going to die unless you get treatment, she probably was like, I don't want to live anymore.
So are you telling me that she had kind of like the Somewhere in Time ending?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Okay,
Somewhere in Time.
By the way, another great movie. If you want to,
it's okay. It's okay. It's kind of a cheesy romance, though. It's not really my cup of tea. But a lot of my wife's friends,
at the time,
wife's friends love that movie because it was shot in Mackinac Island at the Grand Hotel. And that's a popular tourist spot for Michiganders.
A lot of people don't know this, and I just found this out. Christopher Reeve, and I finally figured out why. Like, if you saw him like later when he was fucked up, he didn't have any hair, and I thought, was he getting chemotherapy or something? He had alopecia.
Oh, really? He had the
and they were able to kind of like work with it in the first two movies. He was young, and they would just kind of comb it and put stuff in. But if you notice, like by Superman 3, he has to wear a wig.
Really?
It's just tough. He didn't necessarily have like male pattern baldness. He had like chunks of it was just falling out.
He is still a piece of history. He's still the best Superman.
He is, and again, it's the performance.
And he'll always be.
Somehow.
It's an iconic performance. You have this epic quality, as I said, that Donner was always aiming for. I don't think the Salkins were aiming for that epic quality. I think what they wanted was a straight comic book adaptation. Just let it go and tell the story that way. Now, the reason I think Superman works for me, you were talking about all the comic book movies before.
Yeah.
I'm not a comic book movie guy. It's too much. There's too much. There was something very special about Superman being released in 1978. No one made a comic book movie, and certainly not one on this scale. It was an enormous undertaking. It was a serious movie. Serious money was being spent.
I just realized you could almost say this is part of some sort of completely disconnected trilogy of big movies. It starts with Jaws, then Star Wars, then Superman. Like those are kind of like the big three of that time.
Yeah, it goes on to form an industry, but that industry doesn't really kick into gear until, I want to say, maybe the late 90s. Even after the Batman, the Tim Burton Batman of 1989 was a huge event, and it was a movie I love. I actually love that movie a lot more than the work Christopher Nolan put in. Christopher Nolan's a fine filmmaker. I never much cared for his conception of Batman except for the first movie, Batman Begins. That one I really liked. I did not care much for The Dark Knight or The Dark Knight Rises.
Oh.
They take this shit way too seriously, and then it becomes Marvel becomes this big thing with the Spider. It starts off with the Spider-Man movie, and then they've got all these products that they launch, and it becomes this enormous empire, and it's just cranking out comic book movies.
Well, see, I gotta say, in defense of Marvel, somehow the minimum quality of the least good Marvel movie, at least to me, and I'm a curmudgeonly moviegoer. I'm like,
what's the worst Marvel movie? Wait, before you start, what's the worst Marvel movie you've seen? The adaptations.
What was I would say the second Thor, The Dark World, which I recently watched again. I'm like, this doesn't suck. This is actually kind of good. This is still better than most movies. It's got some good stuff in it. And then so basically the worst Marvel movie is still, that's pretty good. And then it goes up to, that was fucking awesome. So, and my goodness, you need to see the third Thor movie. I
barely remember the first one, directed by Kenneth Branagh.
First, well, it's very simple. And the great thing is, it's kind of connected but not connected. But it's kind of its own sort of special beast where it's directed by Taika Waititi.
And
he did What We Do in the Shadows, which is another movie you need to see. It's about these vampires in Australia. It's kind of got that Flight of the Conchords kind of feel to it.
I'll give you an indication, an inkling. I mean, there are parts of the Iron Man movies that I enjoy, but I only enjoy them for Robert Downey's smartassery and his performances. He's a real smartass in these movies. I like that. That to me was something fresh. He wasn't a superhero. He didn't act like one,
Well, he's great. He's great in the new. I mean, because like this, I always feel great because he's making a ton of money. But he's great in the.
But
new
I think
one.
He's great as Iron Man.
He's Iron Man in the new Avengers, the Infinity War, and it's just so funny because as we're recording this, I just found out like the trailer for the second Infinity War, Avengers, whatever they're going to call it, is supposed to drop today. So I'm very excited about that, and it's like. This is a great time to be a nerd. This is a great time to be a nerd.
Of course it is. Yeah, it's absolutely a great time to be.
When this movie, because when the original Superman came out, there really was no such thing as like a comic book. Being a nerd wasn't mainstream. Being like
when we were kids, you used to laugh at kids who read comic books.
So to have this movie have such a broad appeal. I mean, this movie appeals to just about every age group that likes movies.
All right.
Like men, you got men, they like big action movies. You got kids, they love Superman. You got comic book nerds, they're going to love it. You got women because, Chris Reeve is dreamy. It appeals to everyone.
Well, okay, yeah, Superman. Okay, now this, man, I mentioned this a little bit to you before. Mm-hmm. We should be investing serious money in major re-releases of these movies. We have, like I said, we have the technology. We have digital technology. Now, the digital projection of Superman was fine. No flaws. I didn't see any problems. The only problem with digital technology is there's no imperfection. It's completely. I mean, like grain disappears. Film grain, things like that.
Well, I mean, you probably get the imperfection of it because it was shot on film, and they tried to retain all the film grain that they could. I'm assuming because it's kind of like when we were talking about Close Encounters of like it was kind of grainy. It was grainy, noisy.
And the grain shows the flaws in the digital playback. But we are getting so much better We're getting so much better at this digital projection, and you got to figure digital projection costs have got to be a fraction, like a significant fraction of striking prints and running them through a projector.
From what I know of what they do, and I don't know why they do it exactly this way, but there must be a reason. What they do is they send them a hard drive with the sort of the digital file on it.
Yeah.
And it's like an encrypted file that has to be renewed by some sort of to go back to Superman 3, and maybe you need 2 keys at the same time and to wear a big fucked up hat. And,
Mm-hmm.
And like
you thought I was drunk too.
Yeah.
I love Richard Pryor in that movie. I absolutely love Richard Pryor in that movie.
Watch out for the tree. Whoa! They get it for a certain amount of time. It's all like, and look, copyrights, they should be able to protect whatever they own. It's great. But that's the way they do it. Now I was thinking, couldn't they just like download an encrypted file like over the internet and even save even more space?
Yeah,
like,
they probably could, and they'll probably get to that. They'll probably wind up doing that at some point. It'll become a serious rental situation.
It might be the
now,
reason.
Figure this. Hang on. The cost of striking a print for theatrical release is $1 million. So that this is going to be like maybe $100.
Yeah, I'm thinking. Well, the reason I'm thinking just because of the digital file that they give them is like tens and tens of terabytes of it's like a completely uncompressed digital file what they give them.
Yeah.
So it's like a huge. It's almost like a whole computer itself.
Might be close to a terabyte, I would say.
And I'm thinking that what happens is if they tried to download it off the internet, they tried to keep downloading movies. Internet companies do charge you for the amount of information going through the internet. It might actually be cheaper to just, put it on a hard drive and then mail them the hard drive or something like that. It might actually end up being cheaper.
Yeah. So you're cutting costs. So what I propose is instead of these Fathom 3-day things, I mean, it's only playing for 3 days here in New York, and 3 days in other places. It's only getting this limited run like Wrath of Khan did, like Close Encounters did. I want to see a massive re-release of movies instead of these remakes and these reboots. I want to see in 10 years, I want to see the original theatrical cut of Star Wars released to theaters for a 3-month run. That's what I want to see.
They're still quietly working on it, and it's actually going to be very helpful now that Disney owns Fox, because now they don't have to do some sort of weird negotiation. Like that might have been like half the
or any other movie. I want to see Jaws. I want to see E.T. I want to see the big movies that we saw. You can make money doing this. You don't have to do Ghostbusters with all women and have it suck. You can put Ghostbusters out there. We watched it for Thanksgiving. We showed it to Regan. The movie still holds up. It's still incredible to watch.
Yeah, I think that
I think you're going to get more people. You're going to have You could have.
Well, see, here's the problem. Here's what I think the problem is. The audience for these kind of things is us. It's like old farts like us, or old farts like us that have kids and want to show like to our kids.
Well, there is that, but just because something's new doesn't mean it's good. Going and remaking a movie, going and remaking all these movies is not. That's not any kind of what you can do. It's something that can be old and still be new. It's always going to be new. Like my daughter got to watch Superman with a fresh set of eyes. She had never seen it before.
Yeah, and I'm thinking,
and I'm wondering if she's feeling what I felt when I was 7 years old watching it.
Well, okay, now she's 12 now, right?
Well, she's going to be 12 in a month.
She's going to be 12 in a month. Now, has she gotten to the slightly pissed off phase yet? The almost teen, like hates everything phase, or does she still have that sort of childlike wonderment?
It's a combination of the two. She still has the childlike wonderment, and she's becoming, appropriately disillusioned as she grows older. Okay,
and you need that, and I think.
But it's like living with a schizophrenic gremlin. She's a source of considerable havoc, and she dominates the house when she's in a bad mood, and when she's in a good mood, suddenly spring returned and butterflies are in the air and stuff like that.
And are you able to sort of keep her somewhat sheltered from the horrible world that we all know is out there?
Not really, no, because she hears everything, and she's here right now looking at me. She's back from school. Hi,
hello.
Sweetie. But me and mommy, hey, you're part of the family now, Anderson. How about that? Me and Mommy have conversations of an adult nature. We talk about how messed up everything is in the world, and Regan is always there within earshot, and she hears, and she even engages in conversations with us. So, but good. She's not jaded. She can't be jaded. She's such an incredible kid, and she brought home a report card last week with grades, and really good grades, and I was impressed. Her math is so much better now. I mean, but having a child is the greatest joy, and this is why I have to encourage it to you, Anderson, is that it's like re-experiencing your own childhood, and you get to see it through the eyes of your kid.
How about this? How about I get a girlfriend that's in her 20s?
Okay.
And then I can just share stuff with her.
Okay. Maybe more thought was put into things, or maybe we're just looking at it through nostalgia and we're thinking, oh, things were just better when we were younger. Like,
well, also it helps that it's just a really well-made movie, and that's the rarity of.
But you can forgive some of the inconsistency. Like I said, it's incomplete. It feels incomplete because we get so much of his origin, and we're an hour and 15 in before Superman finally flies. And when he does, it's a series of vignettes. He catches criminals. He catches a cat burglar. Awesome. He saves Lois Lane. The pimp is like, hey, man.
Hey, Jim, that's a bad outfit.
And then he puts the criminals in jail. He stops a boat. He puts a boat in the middle of the street. And then he finishes up his day by rescuing a cat out of a tree. And the wonderful bit there where it's like, Mommy, there was a man who flied and he rescued the cat. And she's like, I don't want to hear any more of your lies. And you hear a slap, which is like, and that got a chuckle because that's something you don't see in movies anymore.
That's 70s parenting right there.
And then we move on and it's like, who is this mystery man? Perry White is like great. He's energetic and everything. He's like, Kent, what's his favorite sports team? And that gets a big laugh, too, for some reason. And then he looks like he's about to answer. He's like, well, I think Superman's a Mets fan. And everybody would be like, what? And Metropolis is so obviously New York.
The funny thing is, I'm starting to realize, watching this movie, I'm like, I am, in any sort of social situation, I kind of am Clark Kent. People don't know what to make of me because I'm like this sort of nice, polite, like decent
he is very
guy.
polite.
Like, they don't know what to make of me.
And what's more, I mean, like Lois Lane is so, I don't know, Lois Lane is so interesting in the movie because it's Margot Kidder. She's got that 3-pack-a-day voice and Scotch whiskey, of course. This is
just before the drugs and mental illness got her.
Yeah. But she's more jaded than Kent, and she's more, I mean, like, it's such an interesting thing because the way you see Lois in the cartoon that precedes the movie, she's like this woman. She's like, it's feisty go-getter, but she's like, oh, Clark, I'm a woman, haha, and Clark is like,
but of course, as soon as Superman shows up, she completely melts. Because, that
they have a little date.
Right
that was one of my tear-jerking moments was watching them fly, and then we hear Margot Kidder doing the song. Remember?
Yes. That. Can you read my mind?
Can you read my mind? It's a song. It's actually a song. They made a song with John Williams music, and I'm not sure if he wrote the lyrics or not, but she's reciting the lyrics to this song that then was released like maybe a month after Superman was in theaters, and that became a Billboard hit too as well because of course John Williams back then. I mean, he was almost like a pop songwriter, but he was a classical composer.
Now, if you want to flip it, and we're talking about your favorite movie, Superman 3, when he meets Lana Lang again,
Annette O'Toole looking delicious.
O'Toole, super hot in that movie, by the way.
Yeah,
she likes Clark. She's like Superman, meh, but she likes Clark. She likes that kind of dorky.
Remember, we do see Lana and Brad as teenagers in the first movie, and it seemed like Lana was interested in Clark, but Clark isn't the kind of guy who makes moves until he gets the red kryptonite. That is.
Yes, there's hope, and there's one part of the movie where it's like they talk about are we going to Addis Ababa, Mr. Luthor? And then they apparently went there to get it because there's like a small thing of 3 dead in Addis Ababa or something because they went in and I guess killed somebody to get the kryptonite. And then of course the kryptonite just sort of shows up.
Yeah.
And there could have been a little scene of them going to Addis Ababa or coming back from Addis Ababa.
Wasn't there? Wouldn't there have been for the TV version? Did they at least shoot it, or was it just?
I don't know. We have to contact Chris Cooling.
You're going to see something where somebody breaks in, steals some kryptonite, and shoots two people. I mean, two people died. I mean, they kind of died off camera in the way they talk about it. So,
one thing I noticed, because the movie was shot in England, when they're actually showing like the footage of like Superman doing his thing on the TVs. Those TVs look like sort of British TVs because they have that kind of British TV look. They have more sort of round screens that kind of come out of the thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I always notice that.
Yeah, we get like little snippets of the adventure, but we don't really get into a story proper until right toward the end of the movie when Lex sends the little dog signal that only dogs and Superman can hear. Superman shows up, and it was all subterfuge, and Lex Luthor's grand plan, which my wife, I think, complained about a little bit. She was like, he's a supervillain. All he wants to do is control real estate, which is like, I'm like, that's how you control things. You control the land.
Remember, this was written by Tom Mankiewicz. He's basically a James Bond villain.
Yeah, yeah. Except Luthor, Hackman's Luthor is trying to play it straight, but Otis is like severely screwing him up. Otis is severely turning this into a comic enterprise.
You want to see a really long arm?
And also, you realize how stacked Valerie Perrine is. My God. My God. That is a woman and a half, that one. She would be considered morbidly obese today. It's sad.
It's just right. Although I'm trying to think of who would I'd probably like Margot Kidder more, just because she's so sassy, but, you get her around a real man, she melts like they all do.
Yeah, but I think she's a lot sexier in the second movie. Because she doesn't. I mean, it's like there's a lot of stuff happening here, but it seems like Hackman is getting the most screen time out of everything. Yeah. It just seems that way to me. I feel like Reeve is like it's almost like a special guest appearance by Christopher Reeve in this movie. He's more prevalent in the second and third movie.
I mean, he doesn't show up till about halfway through the movie, and you're like, okay, it's almost like
it's a weird structure. It's a weird structure for a movie.
It's weird. It's like almost like the concept of Superman is the star, as opposed to Christopher Reeve, who we didn't know who he was. So it's almost like when he shows up, it's like, oh, you're here.
And for the climax of the movie, which is the bomb.
Yeah.
And actually, what causes all of this is because Tessmacher rescues Superman, but he promises to save Hackensack first.
Yeah.
So he saves Hackensack first. He isn't there in time for the bomb to go off in California, which goes along the fault line. Lois's car goes into the pit, and it gets crushed and crumpled. And my God, this is like the most horrific thing I've ever seen up until that point.
The original ending was she doesn't die, a whole bunch of destruction happens, but Superman saves it. But having thrown the missile into space, the villains escape.
Are then released.
And then are released, they're released, and then you get into Superman 2, which if it had been structured that way, again, it would have been "Fuck you."
and then the movie, he actually reverses the Earth's rotation.
And it's weird. It's like exactly what he's doing. It's like they never explain what that is, but when you see it, it's like, oh, he's traveling faster than light because he's Superman.
Yes.
And this is kind of the moment he decides that he's going to break his vow or whatever. You are forbidden to interfere with human history.
Yes. He has a prime directive.
My son, yes. And he's like, no, fuck it. This is my home.
Yeah, but it's still more probable, and I know the comic book geeks are going to get on my case for this, it's still more improbable than the hypnotic kiss. Now, I know the hypnotic kiss was once used before in the comic book, a long time ago. I know that. But it's just, for me, Superman is the better movie than Superman. Superman 2, it's a lot of time with Lois Lane trying to put two and two together that Clark Kent is Superman. She finally exposes his identity. Clark gives up his powers, but then manages to get them back.
Yeah, and he almost tells her right in the middle of Superman. He kind of like takes his glasses off, and then that's again the performance of he starts off. He starts as Superman. He flies off, and that was a whole sort of. I figured they showed how they did it. Or Mr. Salkind explained how they did it. Of she's on the deck. It's like a rear projection image of him flying off. Then when they pan around, because it's all one shot.
Yeah.
Then Clark Kent comes in. He starts off as all very Clark Kent, and then he's like, I pulled one over on her, and then he almost like has like a moment of guilt of like, maybe I should tell her, and then he chickens out.
Yeah,
And interestingly enough, if you can find the Roger Ebert review of Superman 2, he loves it. And he loves it more than the original.
Really?
He says, this is actually better than the original, and I loved the original.
I think Superman 2 is good when it stays on course. The romance between Lois Lane and Superman, I'm not a big fan of. What I'm a big fan of, I like the Niagara Falls scene. I like the Paris Eiffel Tower scene.
Yeah.
I like Zod and his minions taking over, the president bowing before him. The romance it leaves me dry. I don't like that.
The Zod stuff, you can really tell, like, the original Superman photography, and because it's Jeffrey Unsworth photography, and then whoever did too, it like looks different. It's like it goes from hazy to like a little more sharp.
Yeah.
One thing that always irked me about Superman 2 was about when he goes back to the Fortress of Solitude. Somehow he gets his powers back, but they don't explain any of it. And I mean, you have the Donner cut. It makes that's like the one thing in it that makes total sense. Of he talks to his father, and then his father gives his last sort of energy to him, and that's how he's able to get his powers back or something like that.
Yes.
And that works way better than but of course they couldn't use Marlon Brando because he didn't get paid or whatever. You know, you get his mom coming in at some point. You get the guy who played Lobot.
Yeah.
in Empire Strikes Back is in there somewhere.
I forgot to mention that Cliff Clavin is in Superman too.
Oh yeah, we talked about that.
Ratzenberger.
Superman. Yeah, he's also in Superman 2. Like I said, what's a curl? Basically, to sum up, how about I'll let you do your summation and I'll do mine.
My summation. It was wonderful to see this movie again, especially after a long time. I think the last time I even looked at it was probably the Warner clamshell when I bought it back. What was that? 5-6 years ago, I think. Just looking at it, and more recently, I had gotten the Richard Donner cut, and I had gotten Superman 3. It'd be interesting if I could look at those again. Actually, maybe if Regan's interested, I'll show her the Donner cut, even though it's kind of a mess. But
it is a mess, yeah.
But it's a mess because they want it to be exclusively Donner. No Richard Lester. But there are a couple of Richard Lester bits in there just to hold some of the narrative together. But this movie, it aged remarkably well. Even though a lot of the people in the audience were probably older than us.
Wow.
There might have been a couple of kids in there, and a lot of kids asking questions like, why are the credits so long? You know, which is like, you know, the credits are, you know, they are what they are, man. That's, you know, this was a time when you had that slow build up. It was a time when movies were more of a payoff at the end, not throwing in every climax, every 5 minutes of things, and just you want to have time to relax and relax into a story, especially a story like Superman. It's a wonderful movie. I love this movie so much. I love everybody associated with it, and Warner Brothers and Christopher Reeve and all that. Just wonderful. Just a great movie. And I'll probably pick up the Blu Ray maybe next year. Yeah,
please do. And then like I said, get the 4K. It comes with the Blu Ray, and then you can compare and contrast like I did. Mm-hmm. And then one day you'll get a 4K player, and then you can actually watch it in 4K and see what it looks like that way.
Well, I have a fantastic television. It shows everything. Everything looks good on it.
Yeah, and you can thank me for that because I was the one who nudged you to get it when it was on sale.
It just happened to be on sale.
But okay, so my summation is I kind of like came to this movie in stages. Saw it in the theater, 1978. It's a foggy memory, but I remember enjoying it. And then I remember seeing Superman 2 and loving that, and actually saw that twice in the theater. Then I would watch it, it'd be on TV, and then it was like on cable. I'm like, oh, Superman, oh, okay. Then it's on that I think when it finally, for me, became a thing was when it was in that 2-night presentation because it was a big deal. And then I would occasionally, I'd rent it on VHS. I get the laser disc. I watch it. And then it just kind of became like, it's like almost like just a part of you, kind of like Star Wars, where it's just sort of a part of you, where you just sort of watch it and it sort of is. Yeah. But then I got more sort of a critical eye to it of realizing how good it was when I got that sort of slightly extended cut in 2001. And I'm like, this is actually an excellent film. Mm-hmm. This is it might be in my top 10 of all time movies, period, of how it's constructed. I mean, you were bitching about the construction. I think it's constructed fine. It's perfect. Again, the Christopher Reeve performance is like a miracle. And so I watched that and I'm like, this is excellent. And then it became like film school because I listened to the commentary and everything. So this is like 15 years ago. So then, again, every time it would be on cable, I would watch it. And then I get this. and now I want to revisit it again. And it's weird. I'm almost experiencing it a little bit through you and through your daughter of, it's this new generation, because she might not appreciate it as much as we do, just because, she has other stuff going on. But to have a young person sort of experience, this movie is magic.
Yes.
I feel like this movie, it may not be perfect, but that's not what magic is. It's just some movies, they have that little fairy dust sprinkled on them. They're just like, I'm thinking like Superman, Star Wars, Ghostbusters. I'm thinking like the new Blade Runner.
Okay.
I'm thinking Casino Royale 2006. I'm thinking, just movies where it's like, it's such a good movie.
Okay.
It's just, this is like, I wish all movies were this good.
Yes. Yes.
They give you that sort of that emotional like push that you don't, and you don't even need it because of the whole Christopher Reeve and the sadness of that. That kind of adds to it, but it's like, just as a movie itself, it's just got that magic. You can't quantify it. It just is. And that's what makes it so awesome.
All right. I can't think of a better way to end the episode.